The stars belonged to the Vorak, and everyone in the galaxy knew it. Commander Thexval stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching another world burn beneath him, and felt the familiar satisfaction that came with conquest. The smoke rising from the cities below told him everything he needed to know about this species. They had once called themselves the Kalani, and they had thought their energy shields and plasma weapons would save them, but like all the others, they learned too late that nothing could stand against Vorak might. The Kalani had lasted 3 days longer than most species, which was almost impressive, but in the end, they fell like all the rest, begging for mercy that would never come and offering surrender that came far too late. Thexval flexed his claws and felt the familiar weight of his armor shifting across his shoulders as he moved toward the tactical display where his officers were already preparing reports on the next target in their endless hunt across. The Star's sub-commander Gexdon approached with the data pad containing casualty reports and resource estimates from the latest conquest, and his reptilian features showed the same cold satisfaction that all Vorak felt when another inferior species learned their place in the natural order of things. The numbers were even better than expected. Only 12 Vorak warriors lost in the entire campaign, while the Kalani population had been reduced to manageable levels for harvesting and integration into the Empire's workforce, and the planet's mineral resources would fuel Vorak expansion for decades to come. This was how things should be, Thexval thought, as he reviewed the reports and felt pride in his role as an apex predator bringing order to a chaotic galaxy where weak species struggled pointlessly against the inevitable dominance of their betters. For over 3,000 years, the Vorak Empire had spread across the stars like a great wave of conquest that nothing could stop or even slow, and in all that time they had never encountered a species that could truly challenge them in battle. Some had tried, of course, like the Zalani with their massive war machines or the Koreth with their swarm tactics, but all had fallen before superior Vorak strength and cunning, just as nature intended when predators met prey. The secret to Vorak success was simple. They were built for war in every possible way, from their 8-foot frames packed with muscle and bone to their razor-sharp claws that could cut through most armor to their thick-scaled hide that could turn aside energy weapons that would kill lesser beings. But more than their physical advantages, the Vorak possessed something that separated them from every other species. They had encountered a perfect understanding of their place as the galaxy's apex predators, and a willingness to do whatever was necessary to maintain that position. Thexval had personally led the conquest of 17 worlds and commanded fleets that had subjugated dozens more, and in all that time he had never seen an enemy that could match Vorak individual combat ability or tactical brilliance. The thought brought him satisfaction as he considered his latest assignment, which had come directly from the Imperial Council on the Vorak homeworld, where the greatest military minds in the galaxy planned the Empire's continued expansion. Deep space reconnaissance scouts had detected unusual energy signatures from a small system on the outer edge of the spiral arm, where a primitive species appeared to be developing faster than expected and required immediate investigation. The species called themselves humans, according to the preliminary reports, and they inhabited the third planet of their system, which their scouts had designated as a potential target for conquest and resource extraction. Initial scans showed that these humans were typical of most primitive species, bipedal creatures with no natural weapons or armor who relied on crude technology to compensate for their obvious physical weaknesses. They stood barely 6 feet tall on average, with thin skin that offered no protection, and slow reflexes that would make them easy prey for any Vorak warrior in individual combat. Their planet showed signs of recent technological development with primitive spacecraft and energy weapons, but nothing that could threaten even the smallest Vorak patrol ship, much less a full battle fleet. What made them interesting was the speed of their advancement, which had accelerated dramatically in recent centuries, suggesting they might eventually become a threat if left unchecked for too long. The Imperial Council's solution was typical and efficient: send a hunting fleet to demonstrate Vorak's superiority, break their spirit with overwhelming force, and harvest the survivors for integration into the Empire's workforce. Thexval felt anticipation building as he reviewed the tactical data on this new species, because conquering primitive worlds was always satisfying, but there was something about these humans that seemed different. though he could not yet identify what that difference might be. Their cities were larger than expected, and their population seemed more organized than most species at their level of development. But these were minor details that would not affect the outcome of the coming conquest. The truly important factors were clear. These humans had no significant military technology, no natural weapons or defenses, and no experience fighting an enemy like the Vorak, who had perfected the art of warfare over millennia. Intelligence reports suggested they had some form of global government and military organization, but their weapons were primitive kinetic projectiles and basic energy systems that would be useless against Vorak shields and armor. Their spacecraft were barely capable of traveling within their own system, and showed no signs of the advanced propulsion or defensive systems that might pose a threat to Vorak forces. Most telling of all their communications showed no awareness of the greater galaxy or the empire that now approached their world, which meant they would have no idea what was coming until it was far too late. Thexval began issuing orders to his fleet commanders as they prepared for the journey to human space, which would take several weeks, even with their advanced, faster-than-light drives. The 47th Hunting Fleet consisted of 12 dreadnoughts, 40 battle cruisers, and over 200 support vessels carrying enough firepower to reduce entire continents to ash if necessary, but Thexval did not expect to need such overwhelming force against a primitive species like the humans, who would likely surrender after the first demonstration of Vorak military might. The standard protocol for primitive species was simple decloak. The fleet in their system demand immediate surrender, and when they inevitably refuse, destroy one of their major cities to show them the futility of resistance. Most species surrendered immediately after that demonstration, but if these humans proved unusually stubborn, the fleet carried enough troops to conquer their world through direct invasion. Subcommander Gexdan returned with the final preparations complete and all ships ready for departure to the human system, where another species would learn the hard way that resistance to Vorak conquest was not just futile, but guaranteed to end in total destruction. Thexval took one last look at the burning Kalani world below and felt the familiar satisfaction of another successful hunt before turning his attention to the tactical displays showing the route to human space. In a few weeks, another primitive species would discover what it meant to face the galaxy's apex predators, and like all the others, they would learn too late that nothing in the universe could stand against Vorak might. The stars belonged to the Vorak, and these humans were about to find out why. Captain Kim Dae-ho was reviewing routine patrol reports when every alarm on the bridge of the Earth Defense Force battleship Indomitable began screaming at once. The massive holographic display in the center of the command deck flickered and suddenly showed dozens of unknown contacts materializing near Mars, where nothing should have been possible since human deep space sensors monitored every object larger than a small asteroid. Communications officer Park Mi-jin looked up from her console, with eyes wide and voice tight with barely controlled fear, as she reported that the contacts were artificial vessels of unknown design and they were broadcasting on all frequencies. The message that came through the speakers was clear, despite being translated by the ship's computer from an alien language that no human had ever heard before, and the words sent ice through every person on the bridge. Surrender your world and you will be given the honor of serving the Empire. Kim Dae-ho felt his stomach drop as he realized that humanity's greatest fear had just become reality. They were not alone in the universe, and whoever had found them was not interested in peaceful first contact. He immediately opened a channel to Earth Defense Command, where Admiral Park Ji-woo was already coordinating responses to what every military leader had hoped would never happen, but had trained for since the formation of the Unified Defense Forces. The Admiral's face appeared on the screen, looking grim, but determined as she spoke in the calm voice that had made her one of the most respected commanders in the Defense Forces. Captain Kim, the entire fleet is moving to intercept these vessels, and we need the Indomitable to take point since you're closest to the contact zone. Kim Dae-ho acknowledged the orders and began issuing commands to his crew as they prepared for humanity's first encounter with an alien species that had already made their hostile intentions clear. Lieutenant Colonel Lee Min-ho was leading a squadron of Earth fighters on routine patrol near the asteroid belt when the alien ships appeared, and his first thought was that the massive vessels looked more like predatory animals than spacecraft. The alien ships were sleek and angular with hull designs that seemed intended to intimidate rather than optimize for space travel. and they moved through space with a fluid grace that suggested technology far beyond human capabilities. Lee Min-ho opened communications with his squadron and felt pride in his pilots as their voices remained steady despite the magnitude of what they were facing. The alien vessels began moving toward Earth with obvious hostile intent, and Lee Min-ho knew that his fighters would be the first line of defense against an enemy about which humanity knew nothing, except that they commanded technology that made human ships look primitive. The first skirmish began when alien interceptors launched from the larger vessels and moved to engage the human fighters with speed and maneuverability that should have been impossible for ships of their size. Pilot Han So-young was the first to make contact with an alien fighter, and she reported that their weapons were some form of plasma, energy that could punch through human shields like they were made of paper. The alien pilot flew with confidence that spoke of centuries of combat experience and tactical knowledge that humanity simply did not possess, but Han So-young had something that the alien did not expect. She had grown up in the slums of Seoul, where survival meant learning to fight dirty and never giving up no matter how badly outmatched you might be. And those lessons were about to prove more valuable than any advanced technology. Her fighter was badly damaged and losing power when she made a decision that would change the course of human history forever. She pointed her ship directly at the alien vessel and pushed the engines to maximum. The alien pilot had faced countless enemies over the years and had always defeated them through superior skill and technology, but had never encountered an opponent who would deliberately sacrifice their own life to achieve victory. Han So-young ejected from her fighter at the last possible second as her ship slammed into the alien vessel at full speed, and both craft exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the darkness of space. The explosion sent shockwaves through both fleets as humans cheered the first kill against an alien enemy, while the aliens struggled to understand what they had just witnessed. Engineer Yoon Jae-min was monitoring the battle from the Indomitable's sensor station, and he noticed something important about the alien ships that would prove crucial in the fighting to come. The alien vessels were designed for intimidation and overwhelming force rather than sustained combat against an enemy that refused to surrender, and their tactical systems seemed optimized for hunting rather. Then Warfare Commander Thexval watched the battle recordings from his flagship and felt something he had never experienced before in thousands of years of conquest. A creeping unease about these strange creatures called humans. The tactical data made no sense according to every principle of warfare that the Vorak had developed over millennia, because no rational being would sacrifice their own life just to destroy a single enemy vessel. But the recordings were clear. This human had deliberately crashed her ship into a Vorak fighter knowing that she would die in the process, and somehow this seemed to energize the other human pilots rather than demoralize them. The human fighters began employing tactics that violated every assumption about how civilized species conducted warfare. They attacked in coordinated groups, accepting heavy casualties to achieve objectives, and showed no sign of the individual self-preservation that drove all other species. More disturbing was their apparent lack of fear when facing superior technology and firepower. Instead of retreating when outmatched, they seemed to become more aggressive and creative in their attacks. Sub-Commander Gex Dan approached with casualty reports that showed unacceptable losses for what should have been a minor skirmish against primitive fighters. The humans had destroyed 12 Vorak interceptors and damaged several others before finally being forced to retreat, and their tactics had confused Vorak pilots who were trained to exploit enemy fear and desperation. But these humans showed neither fear nor desperation. Instead, they fought with a cold determination that seemed to grow stronger as their losses mounted and their situation became more desperate. Captain Kim Dae-ho coordinated the human retreat as his forces fell back toward Earth. But he noticed something that gave him hope, despite the obvious technological superiority of the alien forces. The aliens fought like individual hunters, each trying to prove their personal superiority in combat, while humans fought as a coordinated unit where each pilot was willing to sacrifice themselves for the success of the mission. Engineer Yoon Jae-min had managed to scan several alien ships during the battle, and his analysis revealed critical information about their design philosophy and tactical doctrine. The alien ships were built for intimidation with massive energy signatures and impressive firepower, but they seemed to lack the redundant systems and damage control capabilities that human military doctrine considered essential. More importantly, their communication patterns suggested a command structure based on individual authority rather than collaborative decision-making, which might create exploitable weaknesses in extended combat. Admiral Park Ji-woo reviewed the battle reports from the Safety of Earth Defense Command and began formulating strategies based on what humanity had learned in their first encounter with an alien military force. The aliens clearly possessed superior technology and individual combat skills, but they seemed unprepared for opponents who valued mission success over personal survival and who fought as coordinated teams rather than individual warriors. Admiral opened a secure channel to all Earth Defense Force commanders and began issuing orders that would transform human military doctrine for the war that was clearly coming. Captain Kim Dae-ho received his new orders and felt grim satisfaction, as he realized that humanity would not go quietly into whatever slavery these aliens had planned for them. The aliens had superior technology and experience, but they had just learned something about human nature that would prove more dangerous than any weapon. Humans did not fight for personal glory or individual survival. They fought for each other and for the survival of their species, and that made them willing to pay prices that no other species would accept. The first battle was over, but the war for humanity's survival had just begun. Dr. Choi Hye-jin had been studying captured alien technology for 3 weeks when she made the discovery that would change everything humanity understood about their enemy. The alien ship fragments recovered from the first battle revealed sophisticated engineering and materials science that was centuries ahead of human capabilities, but more importantly, they revealed something about alien psychology that explained their tactics. Every system on the alien ships was designed for individual operation, with controls optimized for single users and decision-making protocols that assumed personal authority rather than collaborative command structures. The aliens were apex predators in the truest sense, not just physically, but psychologically built for individual dominance and personal superiority in combat situations. Dr. Choi realized that humans represented something the aliens had never encountered before. In their thousands of years of conquest, a species that had evolved cooperation rather than individual dominance as their primary survival strategy. While the aliens were solitary hunters who relied on personal strength and superiority, humans were pack hunters who had developed complex social structures and collaborative tactics over millions of years of evolution. This fundamental difference in evolutionary psychology explained why the first battle had confused the aliens so completely, because they could not understand opponents who valued group success over individual. Survival General Nam Kyung-soo received Dr. Choi's report while coordinating Earth's defenses from the command bunker deep beneath the Korean mountains, where humanity's military leadership had gathered to plan their desperate resistance. The general immediately understood the implications of the research and began implementing new tactical doctrines that would exploit the psychological weaknesses that Dr. Choi had identified in their enemy instead of meeting the aliens in direct confrontation. Where superior technology would decide the outcome, human forces would employ guerrilla tactics and coordinated attacks that would confuse and frustrate enemies trained to fight individual duels. Colonel Oh Mi-young received orders to form rapid strike teams that would hit alien supply lines and disappear before reinforcements could arrive, using mobility and coordination to offset the technological disadvantage. The new tactics proved effective immediately as human forces began striking alien positions throughout the solar system using small coordinated teams that the aliens struggled to track. Or Counter-Captain Bae Sung-wook commanded the destroyer Defiance when it encountered a massive alien dreadnought near Jupiter, and his first instinct was to retreat since his ship was completely outmatched by the enemy vessel. But then he remembered the new tactical doctrine and opened communications with 2 other damaged human ships in the area to coordinate an attack that should have been impossible. The 3 human ships were barely functional with damaged weapons and failing shields, but Captain Bae realized that together they might accomplish what none could achieve alone. The aliens expected individual ships to flee when outmatched, but they were not prepared for coordinated attacks by multiple vessels working as a single unit. Captain Bae coordinated the attack with split-second timing as all 3 ships struck the alien dreadnought simultaneously from different angles overloading its defensive systems. The massive alien ship had enough firepower to destroy any single human vessel with ease, but its targeting systems could not handle 3 coordinated attacks happening at the same time. The Defiance and her sister ships concentrated their fire on a single section of the dreadnought's hull, using their combined weapons to punch through armor that would have shrugged off individual attacks. The alien ship exploded in a fireball that could be seen from Earth, and the victory sent shockwaves through both fleets, as humans realized they could defeat enemies far more powerful than themselves. Commander Thexaval watched the recordings of the dreadnought's destruction with growing unease as he tried to understand how primitive ships had managed to destroy one of the Empire's most powerful vessels. The tactical analysis made no sense according to Vorak military doctrine, because the human ships should have fled when faced with overwhelming odds, instead of attempting a suicidal attack. But the attack had not been suicidal. It had been carefully coordinated with precise timing and flawless execution that suggested these humans understood warfare in ways that the Vorak had never encountered. More disturbing was the psychological profile emerging from captured human communications, which showed no evidence of the individual fear and self-preservation that drove all civilized species. These humans seemed to view themselves as cells in a larger organism, each willing to die for the survival of the whole. And this made them fundamentally different from any enemy the Vorak had faced. Sub-Commander Gexdon reported increasing casualties as human resistance continued to grow stronger rather than weaker, despite suffering heavy losses in every engagement. The humans were learning from each battle, adapting their tactics, and developing new strategies faster than Vorak forces could counter them, and this violated every principle of conquest. That the Empire had developed primitive species were supposed to become demoralized and surrender when faced with superior force, but these humans seemed to become more determined as their losses mounted. Colonel Oh Mi-young led a strike team against an alien supply depot on one of Saturn's moons and demonstrated the new tactics that were driving Vorak commanders to distraction. Her team moved in perfect coordination with each member, knowing exactly what the others would do without needing constant communication, and they struck the depot from 6 different directions simultaneously. The alien defenders were trained to repel frontal attacks or to hunt down individual infiltrators, but they had no experience dealing with coordinated, multi-directional assaults by enemies who fought as a single unit. The supply depot was destroyed within minutes, and Colonel O's team vanished into the moon's complex cave system before Vorak reinforcements could arrive to engage them. This pattern, repeated across the solar system, as human forces developed new forms of warfare that exploited alien assumptions about how civilized species conducted military operations. Captain Kim Dae-ho coordinated fleet actions that used human numerical superiority to offset alien technological advantages as Earth's shipyards worked around the clock to replace losses. The aliens had superior individual ships, but humans had learned to use multiple vessels as extensions of a single tactical mind, and this coordination proved devastatingly effective. Engineer Yoon Jae-min continued analyzing alien technology and discovered that their ships were designed with certain assumptions about enemy behavior that humans consistently violated alien defensive systems were optimized to handle predictable attack patterns by enemies who valued self-preservation, while human attacks were chaotic, unpredictable, and seemingly suicidal. The aliens' tactical computers could not process human behavior patterns because their programming assumed rational actors who would retreat when faced with unacceptable odds. Dr. Choi Hee-jin published her research throughout the human fleet explaining how evolutionary psychology gave humanity unique advantages despite their technological inferiority. Humans had evolved as social hunters who succeeded through cooperation, coordination, and willingness to sacrifice for the group, while aliens were solitary predators who relied on individual superiority. This meant that humans could continue fighting effectively even after suffering casualties that would break the morale of species that valued individual survival above group success. General Nam Kyung-soo began receiving reports from across the solar system showing that human resistance was not only holding but actually gaining strength as more forces learned the new tactics. The aliens controlled most of the outer system, but they were learning that controlling territory meant nothing when the enemy refused to fight conventional battles for conventional objectives, Commander Thexaval faced something no Vorak commander had ever experienced before, an enemy that grew stronger as the conflict continued and seemed to learn from every defeat. The humans were not just defending their territory. They were teaching themselves new forms of warfare and developing capabilities that threatened fundamental assumptions about Vorak military superiority. For the first time in 3,000 years of conquest, a Vorak fleet was facing the possibility of actual defeat by an enemy they had initially dismissed as primitive prey. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one that hunts in packs. Dr. Kim Tae-young worked in the hidden research facility beneath Europa's ice sheets, where humanity's greatest scientific minds had gathered to turn desperation into innovation. The facility had been built in secret over the past decade as Earth's leadership prepared for the possibility of alien contact, but no one had imagined they would need to develop weapons to fight for humanity's survival. Dr. Kim's team had been studying captured alien technology for months, and they had made breakthroughs that would have taken decades under normal circumstances, but war had a way of accelerating human creativity. The alien plasma weapons used a form of contained energy that human science barely understood, but the research team had managed to reverse engineer the basic principles and adapt them for human use. More importantly, they had discovered that alien technology relied on certain assumptions about how enemies would behave, and these assumptions created vulnerabilities that human ingenuity could exploit. Private First Class Lim De-young was a combat engineer who had grown up in the agricultural regions of Korea, where her family had developed natural pesticides and biological agents for crop protection when she suggested using similar techniques. Against the aliens, her commanding officers initially dismissed the idea as impractical, but desperation made even unlikely strategies worth considering. Lim De-young's proposal was simple and terrifying. The aliens had enhanced senses that made them superior hunters, but those same enhanced senses could be turned into weaknesses. She had noticed from battlefield reports that alien warriors relied heavily on their ability to track enemies through scent and electromagnetic signatures. And this dependence could be exploited, working with Dr. Kim's research team. She developed chemical agents that would overwhelm alien sensory organs, turning their predatory advantages into crippling disadvantages. The first test of the new weapons came when Major Seo Woo-jin led an assault on an alien-held position on Mars using atmospheric dispersal systems to deploy Lim De-young's chemical agents. The results exceeded every expectation, as alien defenders found their enhanced senses completely overloaded by chemical compounds that human nervous systems could tolerate, but alien physiology could not. The aliens stumbled through their own base blind and disoriented, while human forces moved through the chemical clouds with minimal protection and systematic precision. Major SEO's forces captured the position with minimal casualties and recovered intelligence that revealed just how dependent the aliens were on sensory capabilities that humans had learned to neutralize. Commander Kang Min-seo was analyzing alien ship movements when she made another crucial discovery about enemy technology that would change the course of the war. The alien vessels were designed to project power and intimidation with massive energy signatures that could be detected across entire star systems, but this design philosophy created unexpected vulnerabilities. Human stealth technology had originally been developed for submarine warfare on Earth, where vessels needed to hide from enemy sensors in three-dimensional environments. The same principles that allowed submarines to disappear in Earth's oceans proved devastatingly effective against alien sensors that were designed to track large, powerful targets. Commander Kang began coordinating stealth attacks using human ships equipped with experimental cloaking systems that made them invisible to alien detection methods. The aliens had never encountered enemies who tried to hide their power and presence, because every species they had conquered fought through displays of strength and intimidation. Human stealth ships began appearing throughout the solar system, striking alien forces without warning and disappearing before counterattacks could be organized. The psychological impact on alien forces was profound, as they found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to materialize from empty space and vanish just as quickly. Sergeant Young Da-hyun was coordinating intelligence operations when he proposed a new form of warfare that would prove even more effective than advanced weapons or stealth technology. He had been studying alien communications and noticed that their military culture was built around concepts of honor and individual superiority that made certain human tactics particularly disturbing. Sergeant Young began broadcasting footage of human suicide attacks throughout alien communication networks, using their own technology to distribute propaganda that undermined their morale. The aliens were psychologically unprepared for enemies who chose death to achieve victory because their entire worldview was built around the assumption that survival was every being's primary motivation. Watching humans deliberately sacrifice themselves for tactical advantages was profoundly disturbing to a species that viewed death in battle as the ultimate failure. The psychological warfare escalated as human forces began developing new tactics specifically designed to exploit alien assumptions about rational behavior. Commander Thexval found himself facing reports of human activities that challenged everything the Vorak Empire understood about warfare and civilized behavior. Human forces were using biological weapons that turned alien advantages into disadvantages, employing stealth technology that violated assumptions about how powerful enemies should behave. Most disturbing of all, they were broadcasting evidence of their willingness to die for victory throughout Vorak communication networks, and this was having unexpected effects on Vorak morale. The 47th Hunting Fleet had been designed to conquer primitive species through overwhelming displays of force, but these humans refused to be intimidated by superior technology. Instead, they adapted to every Vorak advantage. Faster than the Empire could develop countermeasures, and they seemed to view each defeat as a learning opportunity rather than a discouragement. Sub-Commander Gexdan reported that Vorak casualties were mounting at rates that would have been unthinkable. At the beginning of the campaign, the humans were not just resisting conquest, they were developing new forms of warfare that threatened to spread throughout the galaxy if other species learned from their example. Dr. Kim Tae-young's research team made another breakthrough when they discovered that alien armor and shields could be penetrated using modified human weapons that exploited resonance frequencies. The aliens had designed their protection against energy weapons and projectiles used by other galactic species, but human engineering approaches were different enough to bypass their defenses. Human weapons began appearing that could punch through alien armor like paper and disable alien shields with electromagnetic pulses that their designers had never anticipated. Private First Class Lim Da-young's biological warfare program expanded as she developed new compounds that could disable alien equipment and disrupt their technological systems. The aliens had never encountered enemies who would deliberately contaminate battlefields with substances that made areas uninhabitable for their species while remaining safe for humans. Commander Kang Min-seo's stealth program produced a new generation of human ships that could move through alien-controlled space undetected and strike targets deep behind enemy lines. The combination of stealth technology, biological warfare, and psychological operations was proving more effective than humanity's leaders had dared hope. When the war began, Major Seo Woo-jin led increasingly successful ground operations as human forces learned to exploit every alien weakness while compensating for their own technological disadvantages. The aliens were discovering that superior technology meant nothing when enemies refused to fight according to established rules and instead created entirely new forms of warfare. Sergeant Young Da-hyun's psychological operations were having effects throughout the alien fleet as Vorak warriors began questioning assumptions about their own superiority. For the first time in their species' history, the Vorak were experiencing doubt about the outcome of a military campaign, and this doubt was spreading through their command structure. Commander Thexval realized that his fleet was not just fighting for another conquest, they were fighting to maintain Vorak credibility as the galaxy's dominant military force. If these humans succeeded in resisting Vorak conquest, other species throughout the galaxy might begin to believe that the Empire could be defeated. The war for Earth was becoming something much larger, a test of whether the established order of galactic civilization could survive contact with human creativity and determination. The humans were teaching the galaxy new lessons about warfare that threatened to change everything. The established powers thought they knew about military science. Evolution had prepared humanity for this moment, not through superior technology or physical strength, but through their unique ability to adapt, cooperate, and innovate under pressure. The galaxy was about to discover that the most dangerous species was not always the strongest or most advanced, but the one most willing to change everything, to survive. Admiral Park Ji-woo stood in the command center beneath Seoul, watching tactical displays that showed human forces preparing for the most ambitious operation in their species' history. Operation Switchblade would either break the alien fleet's command, structure, or result in the destruction of Earth's remaining military forces. But after months of desperate fighting, humanity had run out of conservative options. The plan required perfect coordination between multiple fleet elements, ground forces, and special operations teams, while the aliens commanded superior firepower and technology. But Admiral Park had learned something important about warfare during the long campaign. The enemy's greatest strength could become their greatest weakness. If human forces remained unpredictable, Colonel Lee Hyun-sik received his mission briefing in a secure facility on Luna, where Earth's most elite soldiers had been training for operations that conventional military doctrine considered impossible. His Special Forces team would infiltrate the alien command ship, while Captain No Yoon-ju led a diversionary fleet action designed to draw alien attention away from the real objective. The mission seemed suicidal because the alien flagship was heavily defended and located at the center of their formation. But Colonel Lee had volunteered because someone had to take the risk. His team consisted of 12 soldiers who had survived the entire war and learned to fight aliens on equal terms despite lacking the physical advantages that made their enemies natural warriors. They would use experimental stealth suits, biological weapons, and human ingenuity to accomplish what alien military doctrine insisted was impossible. Dr. Shin Jae-hyuk had been working on the most secret project in human history, developing weapons that would turn alien technology against its creators in ways that exemplified human warfare. The captured alien plasma cannons could be modified to produce devastating effects, but only if operated by crews who understood they would not survive the process. Dr. Shin's weapon systems were designed around human willingness to sacrifice individual lives for collective victory, and this made them incomprehensible to alien military. Thinking Lieutenant Commander An So-min volunteered to lead the first operational test of Dr. Shin's weapons, knowing that success would require her to pilot a ship into the heart of the alien formation. Her modified destroyer carried a weaponized alien plasma cannon that could punch through any alien shield, but the energy requirements would overload her ship's power systems and kill everyone aboard. Lieutenant Commander An accepted the mission because she understood something about human nature that made such sacrifices possible. They fought not for personal glory, but for species survival. The final phase of Operation Switchblade began when Captain No Yoon-ju led the diversionary fleet toward the alien formation using every human ship that could still fight. The aliens responded exactly as expected, concentrating their forces to repel what appeared to be humanity's last desperate attack. While their attention was focused away from other threats, Colonel Lee Hyun-sik and his team used the distraction to approach the alien flagship in a modified stealth transport that registered as debris on alien sensors. The infiltration team reached the alien ship's hull undetected and began cutting through armor using tools designed specifically for this mission. Lieutenant Commander An So-min waited for the signal to begin her approach toward the alien battle line, knowing that her ship's sacrifice would either cripple enemy operations or accomplish nothing. When the order came, she pushed her engines to maximum and pointed her ship toward the largest alien vessel while her crew made final preparations for weapons that would consume their lives. The modified plasma cannon required manual operation because automated systems could not handle the energy fluctuations, and this meant her crew would die operating the weapon. Dr. Shin had explained that human weapons were different from alien technology because they incorporated the human willingness to pay ultimate prices for victory. The alien battlecruiser's shields collapsed under the plasma cannon's assault, and the ship exploded in a fireball that lit up space, while Lieutenant Commander An's destroyer vanished in the same explosion. Colonel Lee's team reached the alien flagship's command center, where they encountered Commander Thexval himself, and the confrontation that followed would determine the war's outcome. The alien commander was 8 feet tall with natural weapons and armor that should have made him invincible against human opponents, But Colonel Lee had learned to fight differently. Human combat doctrine had evolved during the war to emphasize speed coordination and willingness to accept casualties that would break alien morale. Colonel Lee did not try to match alien physical strength. Instead, he used human tactical thinking to turn the aliens' advantages against him. The battle in the command center lasted only minutes, but it demonstrated everything that made human warfare unique. As Colonel Lee sacrificed his own safety to achieve tactical objectives, Commander Thexval found himself losing to an enemy who fought not for personal glory, but for something larger than individual survival. As the alien commander lay dying, he finally understood what his species had failed to comprehend throughout their thousands of years of conquest. The humans were not just defending territory, they were demonstrating new principles of warfare that challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about military power. These creatures fought as extensions of a collective will that could absorb losses that would destroy other species and continue fighting with undiminished determination. More importantly, they had shown that cooperation could defeat individual superiority, that innovation could overcome technological advantage, and that willingness to sacrifice could triumph over raw power. The destruction of the alien flagship and the death of Commander Thexval sent shockwaves through the Vorak fleet as subordinate commanders faced something unprecedented in their military experience. For the first time in Vorak history, a conquest had failed, not through superior enemy technology, but through forms of warfare that their doctrine could not. Counter-Admiral Park Ji-woo received reports that alien forces throughout the solar system were withdrawing toward their staging areas as news of their commander's death spread through their ranks. The Vorak Empire faced a decision that no previous generation had confronted: whether to continue a war against enemies who had proven they could not be defeated through conventional means. Sub-Commander Gex Dan assumed command of the 47th Hunting Fleet and found himself reviewing casualty reports that would have been unthinkable when the campaign began. The humans had developed warfare into something that violated every assumption about how civilized species conducted military operations. They used biological weapons that turned alien advantages into disadvantages, stealth technology that made power irrelevant, and psychological warfare that undermined the foundations of Vorak military culture. Most disturbing of all, they had weaponized their own willingness to die, creating military systems that could only be operated by beings prepared to sacrifice their lives for victory. The strategic implications were clear. If the Vorak Empire could not defeat these humans, other species throughout the galaxy would learn that the Empire could be resisted. Captain Kim Dae-ho coordinated the final human operations as alien forces began their withdrawal from the solar system, leaving behind wreckage that would be studied for decades. The war had cost humanity millions of lives and most of their military infrastructure, but they had achieved something that no other species had managed in galactic history. They had forced the Vorak Empire to retreat from a conquest, and in doing so, they had changed the balance of power throughout the galaxy. Dr. Choi Hya-jin published her final reports on alien psychology and human advantages, explaining how evolutionary differences had determined the war's outcome. Humans had evolved as cooperative hunters who could absorb casualties and continue fighting, while aliens were solitary predators who could not understand enemies that valued collective survival over individual preservation. The galaxy received news of the human victory with shock and hope as species that had accepted Vorak dominance for millennia began to reconsider their assumptions about military power. Commander Thexval's death had taught the universe a new truth about warfare. There were things more powerful than claws armor or advanced technology. There was the terrible, beautiful willingness of thinking beings to die for something greater than themselves, and humanity had shown that this willingness could overcome any technological advantage. The predators had learned to fear the prey, and the galaxy would never be the same.